Alright, YouTube, you may have noticed that Vincent Bugliosi is dead, the Manson prosecutor. I found it not remarkable at all, not surprising at all. When the news broke that he had died, almost every headline was Vincent Bugliosi, Manson prosecutor, dead. Essentially, he's known for two things. He's known for prosecuting Charles Manson and writing a best-selling book about the prosecution of Charles Manson, let's face it. As such, his legacy, which if he had never been part of that trial, he would be remembered for many other works. He weighed in on 9/11, he's done other things. But because he was involved with that Manson sort of mythology, the only thing he'll ever be remembered for by 99% of the public that even knows about him at all will be, oh, he's the dude who prosecuted Charles Manson and wrote Helter Skelter. That's what he's known for. Strangely enough, he probably wouldn't have been as well known if he hadn't been involved with that. But I mean, his own opinions, analysis, and in many cases outright fiction regarding the Manson trial, for which he almost himself thereafter went to prison and probably should have, is really his claim to fame. If it hadn't been for his reworking of the entire trial, first by the use of public consciousness and media frenzy and moral panic, he used those to make it into a big case, to make it saleable. And then, of course, wrote his book and then put in much of the content of Helter Skelter as a bunch of witchy stuff that is unsubstantiated. The only reason people presume it's truth is because it happened to be from the prosecutor himself, who invented much of that material as he went along. I think it's rather funny. You've got a lot of... For a while, you didn't really have that much Manson-related stuff. For the internet generation, there were some old interviews, there was some of his music, although by no means as much as there is now. Most of it, some of that music was lost, like the 67 sessions. You were lucky to be able to find a copy of that until a few years ago. Now you can find all of his music anywhere. I mean, it's on iTunes and all that bullshit. Back when I first got around to it, it was basically Lie. You didn't have the B-side Family Jams demos. You didn't have much of his demo material at all. You had Way of the Wolf and Commemoration, and that's basically as far as it went. It took months of digging to find all of these other songs, to find all of these other interviews, like I can't remember the name of the interview. One of them, it wasn't even on YouTube. It was on some foreign hosting video site. That, I mean, it took me forever. When I found the list of interviews that had been conducted, it took some time to actually find a video that I could then take and re-upload to YouTube. As the result, it simply wasn't there. It wasn't well known enough to be in people's minds, I guess. Now they're all up on one of my alternate channels, other than the ones that got copyright strikes for no apparent reason at all. Until then, it was all the Tom Snyder interview and the Geraldo interview and, maybe Charlie Rose, and that's about as far as it went. Michelle Ben Horan, you never saw that one before, I managed to dig it up, essentially, and parse it together from the clips that were there. But I find it funny. Vincent Bugliosi is known as that dude who happened to put Manson in prison. Rather karmically telling. I don't think that's a coincidence. You see, another reason why I've sort of distanced myself from bothering to talk about Manson much. You've got a lot more things going on right now, and the sort of the illusion basically that Nicholas Schreck made in his Tate LaBianca radio interview was the Manson black hole. The idea that people that get too involved with this sort of get sucked in, and pretty soon, because of the limelight shining on them from the Manson mythology, they quickly get transformed into basically stereotypical characterizations within that same system. Essentially, somebody who spends too much time only doing Manson stuff will either become obsessed with it and basically go, completely apeshit or something, or they get slammed with either the moniker of either being a hero or villain. The mass population would say, well, anyone that's against this stuff is the hero, and Manson and his flunkies are or friends or whatever, they're all villains. They're, obviously a bunch of criminals, or they're constantly soaking themselves in LSD. And of course, others have a different approach to it. But even people within like the environmentalist movement who have, looked a little bit too far into Manson's stuff end up, getting branded as being sort of Manson's new followers, Manson's new generation, or something like that, because the public consciousness has the constant worry that Manson is indoctrinating people. Somehow, despite being frequently in solitary and getting one phone call a day, he's still managing to brainwash thousands or tens of thousands, hordes of legions of followers. This is, of course, not the case. That's simply an illusion that people simply have because they're so afraid of Manson and everything he stood for, which was not very much. It was essentially the leave me the fuck alone survivalistic philosophy, sort of an offshoot of the hippie movement that he happened to be involved in, and really wanted to do a lot of drugs and a lot of women and sometimes men, and that's basically as far as it went. But when Bugliosi died, it was clear almost immediately, yes, anything that he did in his life that wasn't related to Manson, nobody's going to talk about it. The media, the thing is, he created the mythology that became Manson. And when he died, he got sucked into it as well. The last things that people will be saying about him over the next few days, before nobody's talking about it anymore, he gets his second 15 minutes of fame upon his deathbed, essentially. Now that he's blue and pale and cold and in a coffin, he gets that second go, when it's too late for him to actually enjoy the fruits of that fame. What's the last thing people say? It's not Vincent Bugliosi, the brilliant prosecutor. Look at all of these brilliantly executed cases. Vincent Bugliosi, he wrote all of these books. No, they're only caring about one case in one book. So, he ended up, in the end, he gets sucked into the same mythology that he himself created. Even as others are slowly breaking away from that, realizing, oh yeah, that's right, it's okay to question the ethics of a criminal case from the 1960s and 1970s. It's actually morally acceptable to do that, and as people distrust the government more and more, they're looking into a lot of these cases and saying, people who have been on death row for 20 years, end up getting clemency because it turns out that there was never any real good evidence to convict them in the first place. Well, if it wasn't for the sort of monstrosity that's been formulated around Charles Manson specifically, and to a lesser degree all the people that supposedly followed him, he would have probably gotten out by now as well. They would have let him out, or at the very least there would be some more people calling for such a thing, or at least reinvestigating the case. I happen to believe that Manson was not intrinsically involved with the Tate murders, and only peripherally involved with the La Bianca murders. In fact, I'm not seeing any particular evidence that he even knew that the first set of murders was going to happen. Well, that right there should give you an indication about how far his guilt actually goes. As I've said before, car thief, yes, admittedly, has admitted to the fact that he stole cars on a regular basis. Nobody opposes the idea that Manson was a car thief. He's self-admitted to pimping, drug dealing, and committing arson. But the thing is, in the perspective of today, if a similar case happened today, in a fair trial, and the public was talking about it, people would say, well, yeah, pimping may be morally wrong, but do we really want, laws against it? There's a burgeoning movement right now to sort of remove prohibitions against prostitution and to try to regulate and tax it like any other business. Dealing, especially with the fact that they were predominantly soft drugs, well, the drug war is starting to end. Back then it was in its heyday. It was right in the middle of the drug war. Committing arson, well, I don't know if there's any specific evidence tying him to the arsons, even though he has admitted to the fact that he burned up some bulldozers and stuff that were involved in one of these landscaping projects in California at the time. I think that it could go either way. Some people would probably say, well, that project was a disaster and destroyed hundreds of thousands of square acres of, fallow land, so maybe you can make an excuse for that. As far as it goes, though, he's in prison for murder, specifically conspiracy to commit murder, basically telling others to go murder for him. That's a mythology. Manson did not murder murder Sharon Tate or the LaBiancas or anything else. He didn't murder any of these people himself. As for conspiracy, no. I do not choose to believe that he actually ordered these murders because I look at the motives that have been put forward. They went crazy due to acid, tried to start a race war. They were trying to free Bobby Beausoleil, copycat style. I look at music as motive. The idea that he was just pissed off at the music industry and really wanted to kill Terry Melcher, but he wasn't there, and they just flipped out and killed everyone. None of these make sense. And in a modern court of law, it's not immediately apparent that the prosecution that took place in 69 and 70 would have succeeded. It's not immediately evident that under the sort of ideas people have today, it's not immediately clear that he would have gone to jail at all. In fact, I believe the going logic is he was offered a plea deal in order to tell on the others that were actually there, because Bugliosi and others realized Manson wasn't at the Tate scene. Well, if he was offered a plea deal, they couldn't have thought that he was too fucking witchy. So that sort of shoots that out of the water right there. I've already discussed why the Melcher motive thing doesn't make any sense at all. But the thing is, a lot of times, other than those that are searching for sort of Manson-related content, like my subscribers here, I don't expect that many of my subscribers will say, well, Manson's just a madman, you're crazy too if you support him at all. I don't expect that to happen. But if the average person just stumbled upon this video somehow, they probably would think so because they haven't studied the case. They might have read Helter Skelter, although even a lot of people that talk about the Helter Skelter stuff, they've never even read Bugliosi's work. They've never even read a single work on the subject. Far be it from them to judge anybody else who is actually, even if somebody has only delved into a few aspects of the case and only skimmed through a couple of these works and maybe watched an interview, they know more than the general person in public does. The general public knows everything they think they know about Manson from what they saw in the nightly news. Oh, well, Manson about to get married. He's, by the way, here's a background on Manson. Killed a bunch of people, or ordered them to be killed. Sometimes they omit that fact. Wanted to start race war. Brutally pissed off at society because he was talentless, no good hack. That's how they think of Manson, because that's what they're told by the news. It's more like they've been lied to. They're ignorant. They're not evil, and they mean harm upon the justice system, and they really want to see innocent people suffer in jail. It's not that so much as they've just been misled. They've been misled for decades, since the 1970s, essentially, when the trial heats up and Manson is transformed from the sort of petty drug dealer, car thief, pimp, sort of average dropout of society, who was a career criminal, admittedly so. He turns from that into somebody who has special powers, is capable of brainwashing people with LSD. I've already explained that's not even possible to do. That's what Manson turns into. I think it's rather fitting that Bugliosi dies, and 99% of the headlines are Manson prosecutor dies, and most of them talk about Manson more than they talk about Bugliosi. They only even mention the dude who actually died in the context of that one prosecution. And maybe the fact that, oh yeah, by the way, he wrote a best-selling book. Guess what it's about? It's about Manson. That's what they talk about. That's what all of the news stories are about. I find it extremely funny. And I wonder if Bugliosi was capable of seeing the headlines on the day that he died, I wonder if he would be slightly miffed that all that the media had to say, from mainstream to tabloid to underground, was Manson-related dude dies. Here's 10 paragraphs about the case, all of which involves Manson, and here's a little bit about his book, which also involves Manson. I think he would be very, very slightly annoyed. I think he would maybe in retrospect find it funny. Hopefully the deity he supposedly believes in does not exist, because for perjuring himself in front of the world during that case, he would probably be in hell for that. So, bearing false witness against your neighbor is a major sin, folks. So, yeah, if Bugliosi's actually a believer in that sort of thing, he must be feeling pretty hot right now. So yeah, Bugliosi's dead. you know, I don't feel sorry for him or anything. I mean, he was 80 years old. He had cancer, so I mean, it's not like he died young or anything like that. But the news headlines did give me mild amusement. That's about all. Peace.